Smile and pause.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. We are so happy that you wanted to join my wife, Susan, and me for this guided tour of the 8th annual exhibition of the work of the celebrated ceramic artist, Gustavo Pérez. We have a wonderful surprise for you. At the end of this guided tour, Gustavo himself is going to join us by Zoom, and you will have the chance to gather in the gallery with us and with him, to chat with him personally, to ask questions or make comments. We are very excited that we were able to arrange for Gustavo to be with us. When the tour is over, we will explain exactly how we can all gather together here in the gallery with Gustavo by Zoom.
Engineering, mathematics, and philosophy. But he had a chance encounter with clay in 1971, and he has been single-mindedly devoted to creating ceramics art ever since then. So this year, 2021, is actually his 50th year working in clay. You will see his background in engineering shine through his work in the precision of his surface designs and in some of his more architectural forms. Gustavo grew up in Mexico City, but for the last 40 years or so, he has lived and maintained his studio in Jalapa, Veracruz. He travels widely and has spent considerable time in Japan, Holland, Hungary, Spain, and the south of France. He's fluent in 4 languages and functional in 3 more. We're going to switch off now, as we will do occasionally throughout the afternoon. Okay.
Let's begin our tour with 5 of Gustavo's most recent works. When I interviewed Gustavo a few years ago, I asked him how being Mexican influenced his work. He replied that he does not know what influences his work, and he doesn't really care. He said that pre-Hispanic art is, of course, part of his background, and that it might be in his subconscious. But in these new pieces, we have work that undeniably refers to Mexico's past. They seem to me to be clearly inspired by pyramids. He has never created anything quite like these pieces before. This glaze is something he's been working to perfect for more than 10 years. This is not a glaze that breaks up naturally when it's fired. Rather, Gustavo has applied several glazes, stroke by stroke, and then it blends together during the firing for a most unusual and beautiful effect. These pieces strongly emphasize their bold, striking forms. On the other hand, when we look at this magnificent piece done in 2019, it's a beautiful example of a strong form and the integration of surface design to harmonize and complement the form. It is a distinctive feature of Gustavo's work and will be a theme we will return to throughout the show. Many ceramic artists emphasize either form or surface design in their work. One of the distinctive qualities of Pérez's work is that he has an extraordinary, endless imagination for integrating his fluid and architectural forms with innovative surface designs so that the two work together to create Gustavo's distinctive look. His pieces combine elegance, precision, and a kind of relaxed, unpretentious freedom. This is a combination that is a rare attribute and difficult to achieve.
This table displays work from 2010 to 2015 over a 5-year period when Gustavo was investigating a great variety of new forms, all quite different, and yet all completely identifiable as Gustavo's work. And this is a second theme we will return to in this tour. Gustavo's work has a distinctive look. It's always possible to identify any one piece as a Gustavo piece. Within this look, there is a stunning variety of forms, surface designs, and ideas in general. He has been creating works of art for 50 years. He definitely does work in series, but every single piece he has created is unique and one of a kind. This is a pillow-like form that almost looks inflated. It looks as though somebody blew it up. It has a beautifully integrated abstract glazing. But contrast this very fluid sculptural form with the linear cube shape on this other form at the end of the table with a very, very different look. Something a little more architectural. A third theme that we want to mention here is that Gustavo identifies himself very much as a potter, a maker of pots, is very oriented toward the vessel. And most of his works start as thrown vessels that he then alters. When he closes off the vessel, it becomes more of a sculpture. And several of the pieces on this table are definitely more sculptural than vessel forms. This pillow piece might look as though it is hand-built, but in fact, it starts with a thrown cylinder that was then altered. Gustavo is a master of the thrown vessel.
I'm so pleased to be able to share this platter with you. It's unique. It's a rare work because Gustavo created it at the Sèvres porcelain factory near Paris. Sèvres porcelain was founded in 1740 and remains the standard setter for the highest quality among European porcelain factories. Gustavo spent 3 years off and on as the artist in residence there about 10 years ago. He was the first ceramic artist invited to be in that program. He was able to work with their technical experts and to experiment with a wide variety of color palettes. Almost all of the works he created there have been sold, and this is one of the only remaining available pieces. After his 3-year residency, the factory produced this book in French, Spanish, and English, chronicling his years at the factory. This copy is the last remaining book and will be given as a gift to the purchaser of this piece. This brings us to another detail about Gustavo's work. Except for these porcelain pieces, he works exclusively in high-fired stoneware. He makes his own clay body by mixing the ingredients himself into a liquid slurry. He then dries it on plaster slabs, and after that stores it in a damp environment so it ages and develops plasticity. Then he works the clay to the consistency he needs. This is a very Japanese method of preparing clay. Most of his works have a smooth surface, but he sometimes adds grit to the clay to achieve a wonderful texture on the finished piece. High stoneware is strong and impermeable, not at all porous. The works on this table span 27-year period, from 1992 to 2019. I grouped them together because they all use a black glaze to contrast with the off-white clay body. It's a theme that has permeated Gustavo's work for many, many years. They also demonstrate a wide variety of decorating techniques. Every method Gustavo develops is all in the service of beauty. He is creating works of art that provide timeless pleasure, that one never tires of enjoying, pieces that are visually interesting, beautiful, and also have a tactile appeal and are a pleasure to touch and a pleasure to view. He cuts into the clay. He paddles it. He stretches it. He deforms it. He gently presses it to create protrusions. Or in this vessel, he has applied pieces to the surface of the piece. He worked in this method for a very short period of time, but he came to the conclusion that works like this, although incredibly beautiful, were also incredibly time-consuming, and he decided not to pursue it. So very few of these pieces in this series are still available.
In this wall piece, Gustavo has press molded a series of uniform blocks. There are actually 4 different designs that he has then arranged in special ways so that they create many different patterns on this extraordinary wall mural. We love this charger that dates from 1992. We keep seeing new things in it all the time. Each year in the fall, when we drive over to Gustavo's studio in Jalapa, it is truly an adventure for us. Gustavo is so incredibly prolific that he has storage rooms filled from top to bottom with works, maybe 6 or 7 pieces deep on a shelf. Some of the storage rooms are dusty and filled with cobwebs. It's a great adventure for us to dig around in these rooms, full of what feel like buried treasures. Because Mayer was himself a ceramic artist, his experienced eye will sometimes spot a gem that others might overlook. With the help of Gustavo's assistants, we unbury spectacular treasures that have been waiting for years to be rediscovered. This charger was one such find, dusty and buried. Imagine how thrilled we were to see it when we pulled it out and dusted it off. What Mayer had in mind when he curated this show was to create a mini retrospective and to show works that cover many different periods of Gustavo's career. And this charger is a great example of that.
On this table, we see what Gustavo calls his taller pieces or his workshop pieces. Thinking very practically, he wanted to create a line of work that would be accessible to a larger group of buyers, a more affordable line. He designs and oversees the production of these pieces, but they are actually made by his assistants. They create multiple designs, multiple pieces of each design. So each piece is not unique, but they are distinctly Gustavo and more affordable than his one-of-a-kind pieces. However, after many, many years of producing this affordable line of pottery, Gustavo's 2 longtime assistants have retired after more than 25 years of working with him. These taller pieces run out, there will be no more. Each piece says GP Taller on the bottom, meaning that Gustavo designed the piece but did not personally make it. This charger, kind of reminiscent of the 50s, was published in Artes de Mexico magazine. Gustavo is the only living artist with a complete issue of Artes de Mexico published about him. and it was the catalog for his major show at the Franz Mayer Museum in Mexico City in 2005. The works on this table were all completed over a 3-year period from 2017 to 2019. I've grouped them together because of their color, but they are also excellent examples of Gustavo's exploring a variety of forms and the integration of form and surface decoration. The forms vary from structured linear forms to more fluid shapes, to this totally novel form that looks almost Asian. To me, it looks like a burnished single stone.
This is the Asian piece Asian looking piece he's talking about. This next fabulous, really fun piece, showing the evolution of a form, Gustavo calls a sequence piece. It's an idea that he has explored over a number of years. This one is from 2012, and this exact piece was part of Gustavo's 2018 exhibition at the Museum of Craft and Design in San Francisco. There are some themes in Gustavo's work that he has returned to over many decades, but always in new, innovative ways. This table shows works made from 1995 to 2019 with a design feature that has become a kind of trademark of his, with the small cuts in the clay and gentle protrusions outward. Cutting into clay is not unique to Gustavo. It is the manner in which he does this that makes his work utterly unique. With elegant precision, like he is ministering tenderly to the flesh. The incisions have a lyric quality that blends perfectly with the form. This kind of precision is extremely difficult to achieve. Gustavo does it all by hand, and no two pieces ever come out the same. Look, exquisitely beautiful and seductive. As we mentioned, many of Gustavo's works begin as thrown vessels or cylinders that he then shapes and alters and combines with other thrown and altered pieces. However, only in recent years, Gustavo has begun to work with clay slabs made on a slab roller. This has given him the ability to create even more complex forms. This yellow twisted piece is an excellent example. The torque or twist in this piece would have been more difficult to achieve if it began as a thrown piece. And there are a few other pieces on this table that began as slabs. And now we're going to move to a different section of the gallery for some very different pieces.
These are very different forms. When I first met Gustavo, he had been working on an installation for a museum in Zacatecas that was designed to be on the floor of the museum as a kind of a maze or a labyrinth. I saw the pieces on the floor of his studio and I was not drawn to them. They were unfamiliar to me. They were not work of Gustavo's that I had ever seen before. I felt they were not typical of his work. But this year, Susan and I went to a studio in Jalapa to select this show. I became more interested in them, and I started to see each piece as sculpture. I realized we could mount them on a stand or on the wall or on a table, and they would take on a whole new life. They have the feeling of being created over long periods of time by erosion, as if you stumbled into a foreign realm and came across an environment where the wind and water created these pieces over centuries. Now, I've fallen in love with them and see that each individual piece stands on its own. Amazingly, each piece started as several thrown cylinders that were then altered and connected. It's hard to conceive of how Gustavo created them, but you can clearly see the clay giving them an appealing grainy texture. The theme of these next pieces is the transformation of previous ideas into entirely new concepts. We've done these eloquent pieces. They are some of his newest work. Example of that he never runs out of new ideas. One idea leads him to another. You can see both the evolution of ideas and also complete departures into entirely new realms of ideas. In different the piece draws you in so that you see foreground and background. It looks almost three-dimensional. This is an incredibly beautiful and successful piece.
Here's a piece, this next piece, that was built from slab forms and is a very complex piece. A wonderful example of the perfection of the integration of form and surface design, with this string design perfectly complementing the form. It's hard to imagine any different design than these lines that Gustavo has created on this complex form. And it also kind of shows his engineering background. Now, these pieces use the same technique as the sequence piece we saw, but they are humorous and endlessly fascinating visual and intriguing quality that results in a conversation piece as well as a work of art. They were manipulated while the clay was still quite wet, and they really represent the plasticity of a fine clay body. This form is extremely hard to execute for it to come out exactly right. The piece has to be manipulated at a precise moment in time.
These two pieces on the wall were glaze experiments for Gustavo. They were test pieces, but I saw them as paintings and had them framed. And this piece has a pleasing simplicity that reminded me of a fine haiku poem. Here is a gorgeous large slap bill piece with an endlessly alluring design. Gustavo uses architectural masking tape in different widths so that where it is taped off, it does not accept glaze. This is just one of hundreds of techniques he has developed and perfected. I love the way all of Gustavo's works have a definite, how did he do that quality? Nothing about any of his techniques is obvious. And the truth is, regarding many of his techniques, they have taken many years for him to perfect. He freely shares his methods, but knowing how Gustavo did something and going to your own studio and trying to do it yourself are two entirely different things. In 2016, Gustavo began creating more sculptural works. These are pieces where the form takes precedence over the surface design. These black pieces are all about form. They are bold, magnificent sculptures. In this next piece, Gustavo took the same sculptural forms he had been creating and experimenting with, but adding surface design to see how that would transform the piece. Again, the design perfectly complements the form for an endlessly satisfying visual experience. As we move to the next table, we will scan some of the pieces that we will not single out specifically.
This fabulous piece is the only piece we found in this, amazingly.
Is from 2007.
There's Gustavo. And here is a smaller version of the sequence piece we saw earlier with these fabulous squashed forms that are so much fun to look at. And how they evolved from a simple cylinder. Now the pieces on this table, this final table, are examples of complex glaze strategies to achieve a variety of colors, with some colors overlapping to create a third color. There's iron in the clay body that integrates with the melting glaze in the firing. So the same glaze may turn out slightly differently depending on its position in the kiln and whether it is receiving more or less oxygen. And on this table, we see slight variations in the yellow glaze, depending on where the piece was in the kiln. We once asked Gustavo if he thinks that artistic talent can be taught. We felt that his answer was right on. He said, I don't think I have talent. I just have to make pots. What you need is passion or undying curiosity. If you can't sit still until you are creating, if you are driven to keep exploring, ability will follow. Desire, yearning, and willingness to work are far more important than talent.